I got to apologize to 3,000 people. I'll cry just thinking about it because they didn't have to do that. They met me with so much love. All I would have to say is I was wrong. The right wing would welcome me with open arms.
Well, that's the grift, by the way.
If your theology make people not want to be here anymore, it's not of God. The birth of my daughter. You're telling me that God is not going to speak to and through her because she's got the wrong plumbing. I think it's the height of human arrogance to look at that and be like, yep, I figured out the thing that created them. I'm just not going to let MAGA redefine Jesus. That is not Jesus.
Buckle up. This is What the Hell Do I Know with JB.
All right. Joe Smith, the real Joe Smith. I am so excited to have you on today. And before we get going, I want to read in a quick intro for you so that my guests know who you are, if they don't already, which is somewhat surprising given your social media presence. But today's guest is Joe Smith, pastor at Maison in Gainesville, Florida, host of the Reasoned Reality Project podcast, and a voice many know online as at therealjoe.smith. Joe has spent years helping people navigate faith after evangelism, creating space for those who feel spirituality homeless but aren't ready to walk away from Jesus. His work explores deconstruction, reconstruction, inclusion, justice, and what it looks like to follow Jesus in a rapidly changing world. So, Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. That intro, that makes me sound awesome.
Well, you are.
I don't know about that. Depends on who you ask.
Yeah, I heard that. So, I mean, you really do have a presence online, and I can, you really know that you're building an audience when your platform is being projected to people, and so you fell into my feed, and I think I first saw the shirt you're wearing today, and I thought, oh,
Really? That's
I
cool.
love this, which I've already bought that shirt now, so it's on
Oh,
the way.
awesome. Yeah. Yeah, that's my wife's side small business. So thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure. And I love it because that's a famous saying that I certainly said myself. I grew up Southern Baptist church and private Christian schools and all of these things, and went to non-denominational church, which was certainly felt, I mean, light years freer than the Southern Baptist church, but still had restrictor plates. Actually ended up planting churches with them. A long story. I've told my audience this story forever. So if offline, when we get together, I'll share it with you. But
Yeah, man, that'd be good.
But I was a default pastor in downtown Atlanta at some point. I really wasn't planning to do it, but I was in Little Five Points in downtown Atlanta and walked with people. And as I went through that journey, it's like all the scales from everything just fell off of me. And I didn't have a term for deconstructing. I just was living with people that I knew I couldn't say the same things. I couldn't get past first base if I said that I love you, but I hate your sin, sort of thing. Like these crazy sort of things. It was like all of a sudden I realized this is who they are. Like it was an incredible. It was a hard time. It was a tough time. I lost some friendships. It was all those sorts of things. And so I know you've probably have some stories there, and I want to dive into that for sure.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
man.
So you often describe church, and I've seen it at different places. I don't know if you're still doing that in Maison and maybe as when you were at your last place in Gainesville, but a church for the rest of us. That's what I've seen you say, a church for the rest. What does that mean, the rest of us?
Yeah. That is a phrase that we used a whole bunch a while ago. We haven't used it as much lately. However, I really resonated with that idea of having a space that basically the rest of us just didn't fit into. Yeah, it now it kind of comes with some baggage now, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, of course, people don't know the full, the story. We won't get into the whole thing, but the trying to make an open and affirming church work in places like Florida,
Mm,
it is not easy. It's incredibly difficult. Um,
yeah.
Mainly because the people that you want to give space for are they're hurt, reluctant, right? Like
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
100%, like, yes, I totally get it. Or they've already moved on, or
Yeah.
they're just like, I'm not interested anymore. I would have been interested years ago, but this wasn't here. So we've moved on to something else. Uh, and the idea behind that phrase was literally just like trying to create a space for people that just didn't fit into the system. And like there were points in time where I really railed against the system, and I still will.
Yeah.
But now I think my focus is more along the lines of just like, okay, well, if the system works for you, great. I think it's awful, and we're going to be here when you finally discover that. However, I'm going to spend my bulk of my energy over here, if that makes sense.
I'm just jumping on here in this quick commercial soundbite to tell you, you have got to start subscribing to this show. If you like the content I'm putting out, which I promise you, I am doing the best to put out great content. And I know you're trusting me with your time when you're listening to this. And it means a lot. And if you feel like I need to listen a little bit more or do something different, I want your feedback. I love your comments. I love the DMs, but I need the subscriptions. And so it is an easy way to support the work that we're doing here at What the Hell Do I Know? Just go ahead and click that subscribe button now. Yeah, no, it does, Joe. It's so interesting you say that, because I find myself trying to say, if I'm going to love people that look, act, feel different than me, and even just me, just let's say my old church self, or even the traditional American church, if I'm going to say I want to step out and love like I feel like Jesus would have loved, I have to, like, I find myself sometimes in the middle, like loving people that outside the church really well. No contingencies, no rules, no set of stuff, right? Just loving them. And then I find myself turning back and saying, I've got real problems with what's going on in the church, but how do I love, like, how do I show grace and compassion there as well? And that is like a tension that I feel like I live in. And sometimes I get pushback from both sides, from not just like, I will, because I kind of agree. There's certain things that I'm just like, yes, I'm affirming. I totally think the LGBTQ plus movement, we've been having it wrong for a long time. I put that stuff down, over a decade ago. I was like, you know, but so there's certain things that I'm just, that's where my faith's taken me. But I felt that before. I totally feel, I worked a lot in the addiction recovery world, especially when I was in Atlanta, pastoring. And there would be people in that world that needed to see, honestly, a fire breathing Jesus. They needed to see a guy that if they got out of line again, retribution was coming. And for whatever reason, that kept them closer to him. I didn't like the fruit that it always produced out of their mouth and actions, but they didn't do the drugs. They didn't do they didn't fall into the addiction circles, because they held closely to this Jesus that would whip them if they got out of line. I don't know. I mean, if he's personal to me, huh?
That makes, what though, that I think that makes total sense.
Right.
Especially if you're coming from that point of view, and that's what you need in that season. And like you said, hopefully they don't need it forever.
Right.
Hopefully they don't need that
Right.
forever.
Right.
Yeah, I struggle with that. I struggle with I do. I struggle with, and I wrote about this the other day on my Substack. I still struggle with fundamentalism in my own heart.
Yeah.
Because it's easier to deconstruct your belief systems, and that's still hard, but it's easier to deconstruct those things than the structures that it produces in your heart, right? Like, or just in your mind, how you process things. And so coming from a very fundamentalist background, I still struggle with a new fundamentalism. And So I often find myself, or I try to remind myself that if I hadn't been given space and time, then I don't know that I would have arrived where I am.
Oh,
So
yeah.
who am I not to give that to somebody else?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I always think too, if there's a phrase, it's a Christianese phrase, but it's a personal relationship with Jesus, right? And that's thrown out a lot, and I'm not actually gonna push back on that because I do have a relationship with Jesus, and he's known me, before I was born, right? And I feel it. I feel it in my heart and my soul. It's just something I feel and work out and appreciate and love and hold on to, and it's personal to me. But if my relationship with people is different than your relationship with the same person, why is my relationship with Jesus has to look like everybody else's? And why does that person's have to look like mine? And that's something I do wrestle with sometimes because I think as Christians, the broader language that I see coming out of the church is this is the way Jesus looks and you need to accept it. This is it. Right. I don't know if that's what and that it feels a lot very dogmatic in that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
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 I, let me add one caveat to that.
Yeah. No, go.
Uh, I think to what I said, I say that coming from a place of like real privilege, right? I mean, look
Mhm,
at me.
mhm,
I
mhm.
am the seat of all privilege in the United States. So things that are hallways to me are
Mm,
closed doors to some of my friends and family.
good point.
So when I say what I just said, I do that from a place of privilege, and with that privilege, I think that means that there's an extra responsibility that I have to own, that people that look like me, that come from the places that I came from and now are not those places, it is our job to be bridge builders, because it's not somebody else's job. It's not my queer friend's job to reach back into the places that harm them, right? It's not my black friend's job to reach back into the white church. It's my
Yeah.
job,
Yeah, you're right.
you know?
You're right. That's a
So,
good point.
yeah, so I just wanted to say that because I didn't want anybody to hear what I was saying, and them not be from the same places and be like, wait, is he telling me that I have to XYZ? No, 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 no. I'm saying for me, I feel like it's part of my responsibility, and I do that well sometimes, and sometimes I don't do that so well. So
Yeah.
I'll just put that out there too.
No, no, that's very fair, and I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
an important point. That is an important point because I often think, like, as a white man, how do my sisters in the church feel about how
Mm,
they're being treated? How do
yeah,
my,
dude.
colored sisters feel? How do like, my queer folks, how do my black friends feel? And, I've told this story numerous times, but I was fortunate enough early on in ministry work, to they go to youth camp and I was the counselor and I was always like the outside guy, that if nobody else would bunk with kids, they'd put Jason there. And so I got teamed up with all the black kids that were at this, youth group, and it was probably the most eye-opening experience I ever had. One of the first kind of deconstruction moments I ever had is, that week in camp, that first week I just said, while other counselors, when they would have free time, would go to the beach or peel away from the kids, for whatever reason, I just decided I'm all in with these kids 24/7. What they do, I'm gonna do. And so we would eat together and we go shopping together. And I would just see how, like, I can remember seeing people watch us through stores and go, I remember talking to one guy, Angel, and I've told this story so much, Angel doesn't care if I use his name, but, these kids were 15 when I met him, right? And I said, "Man, this lady's eye hawking me. She's just eye hawking me through this store." And he looked back, he's like, Yo, Jay, you hang out with this any longer, you'll figure it. You'll get used to it." He's like, "This is just what happens." And I thought, "What?" And I started seeing these things because, like you said, privilege came along with who I was privileged to be born, the skin color I was in, and the gender I was born to, and I fit a mold of what the world says is the right way to live, as far as sexual identification. And so that, by like I love how you said that. I have doors open to me that others don't. I love what you said there. It's so true. But, So leads me to this kind of question here, which I think is an interesting question. I mean, it, going back, and I don't know if you need to go back 10 years or 20 years for your journey, but what are some like really close certain beliefs you had, maybe let's call it 10 years ago, maybe it's 20 years ago, that you had that today you've like totally let go?
How much time do you have?
Yeah.
Uh,
You can give me a
uh,
couple.
yeah. Obviously, some of the bigger ones are like queer inclusion. That's a
Yeah.
big one for me.
Yeah.
I'm incredibly passionate about that one in particular, mostly because I feel like that was probably one of the ones that the churches I came from were most dogmatic about and
Yeah.
still are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, Fortunately, I was never one of those guys that would get up on stage and rail against it. I never found that very helpful. Um, I just never did that. And so I never even taught about it.
Hmm.
I felt like those were conversations that needed to happen one on one. And I had those. They were, they were as nice as you can be when you're non affirming.
Mm,
Um, but I
mm,
have made amends. I have tried to make amends.
yeah. Yeah.
That's what I will spend the rest of my days doing. I say that because I reached out to most of my years. Well, like half my time in ministry was in student ministry, and so I have reached out to all of my old students and apologized, and just said if I played any part in your spiritual trauma, you don't have to forgive me, but just know that I see it, and I'm sorry, and I'm gonna do different.
Gee,
Um,
wow.
yeah, those were some really good conversations, though, man. Like,
Wow,
I'll be
no,
real honest.
powerful. I know.
Yeah.
I am so impressed by that. Like that you had this maturity to offer that to someone, to what got you to that maturity to say that, because it's somebody like I've heard it said that people when they're trying to figure it out, especially at that those youth ages, that 15, 16, this formidable years, they're we think about just living in your own home as a child, and how like it takes years of counseling to shake off all the bad juju you got from your parents. And by the way, parents, this is not like a it's all of us. It's all of us. My friend Megan Hampton with Soul Care for Family says that only 40%, like if you get parenting right 40% of the time, you're doing like excellent. So
That makes
nobody,
sense.
like that's normal for parents. So I'm not trying to say, I'm just saying that we're all trying to shake off the things our parents did that didn't work. But then when you're dealing with somebody in their spirit, like how did, to to give a safe space for somebody that's 15, 16, 17 years old, I give mad applause to. But the fact that you recognize that there might have been some spiritual trauma that you did, or trauma, I should say, you went back and corrected. What got you to that point that felt like you needed to do that?
Uh, well, man, that's a really good question. I guess probably if I'm thinking back on it, I, I think there were things that I would have loved if my childhood pastor had apologized for.
Mm.
He'll never do it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um, But if he had reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'm sorry that I told you that you were worthy of hell when you were a kid. I'm sorry." That would like heal something in like my that little Joe. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
9-year-old Joe.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would do something for me. And I thought, I never said things like that from the stage or
Hmm.
when I was teaching, but I'm sure that there are things that I said that
Hmm.
I'm not even aware of.
Hmm.
Um, Things that, you give a million lessons, you give a million sermons over the
Yeah.
years, and
Mhm.
I can't remember but a handful of things that I ever said. But that kid, there's going to be something that stuck, right? And so I was just like, you know what? I'm not gonna be my childhood pastor. I'm just not gonna do it. And fortunately, as I've gotten older, I have become very self-aware.
Mhm.
So and recognizing that um, the ego is just so childish sometimes, right? Like this
Mhm.
projection of who we are, or
Yeah. Yeah.
what this thing that we build. And I'm just like, you know what? I don't want to play those games as a pastor. or as a human. So I just felt like, you know what? If I'm going to do this, I've got to do it right. It's got to start with repentance. It's got to start with apologies. And so that's what I did before we did anything else, was like, I just started systematically reaching out to everybody that I was still connected to and just said, hey, I love you. I'm sorry. You do not have to forgive me at all. But the responses were like really good. And I'm so thankful for this. The overwhelming responses were, we never felt judgment from you. So you're good. And I was just like, okay, good. But I need you to know that I still worked for this system, that I held these things in my heart. And I'm sorry that I was part of this. And I even, I even got to do that now that we're talking about it. That was one of the pivotal moments of my life, was during my deconstruction, specifically around queer inclusion. I had reached out to our local Pride Center. I just didn't know who to talk to. So I was just like, we have a Pride Center. I'm going to call them, which was really presumptuous of me to do so. But I'm a straight white man.
That's
So
right.
why wouldn't you talk to me?
You can walk into any room without
Any room, baby.
Any room.
Yes. Fortunately, the person that I talked to, we're still close friends. Her name is Tamara. She was the president. She's a Christian, a queer Christian, and so she just gave me space, and we started talking. And when we finally took the church that we were leading at the time from just a typical evangelical church to open and affirming, which is its own story, she really started inviting us into the space. And we just started showing up behind the scenes, no shirts, no invites, no anything. You would have never known we were from a church, but like we would set up and tear down and clean up. And then she invited me. This was during the time when in Florida, when the original Don't Say Gay laws were getting ready to be voted on. And they had put on this huge rally. I mean, there was a couple thousand people at this rally here in Gainesville, and they called it We Say Gainesville and misspelled Gainesville, Gay. And it was pretty clever. And she invited me to speak at it. And I was just like, Tamara, like, I have been here for like 5 minutes. Like, I have not earned the right to say anything other than I'm sorry. And then she's like, well, why don't you just do that? And I was just like, oh, crap. Are you serious? So I worked on that. I don't know how long I worked on that, but I wrote an apology, and I got to apologize to, I don't know, 2,000 or 3,000 people.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
And it was, I have said this before, that I feel like that was the first time that I ever truly experienced what it must feel like to be like just forgiven. Just met with grace.
Really?
Like I'll cry just thinking about it, because they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to do that, right? Like here's this straight dude from a religious system that told them that they were less than, that they were deserving of hell. And they met me with so much love, man. I can't tell you how many hugs and tears I shared after that. Ugh.
By now, you may have heard me talk about my friends at floors.com. That's FLOORZZ. Make sure you go check them out, floors.com. They have all your flooring needs for remodel, new build, great designers in-house. Give them a call. Tell them JB sent you. It'll mean the world to me, but I know it'll mean the world to them. I am so proud to know my friends at True North Pest Control, and I want you to know them too. They're a family-owned business that cares. I love working with family-owned businesses. Traditionally, family-owned businesses live, work, and play in the communities that they're involved in, and True North does just that. They're a growing company, and I would encourage you, if you need pest control service of any kind, termites, bugs, annual sprays, quarterly spray, whatever it is, mosquitoes, they can take care of you. They are your pest control heroes. So give them a call. They're all over Central Florida, here where I live in the Emerald Coast, and the entire state of Georgia. Check them out. That's TrueNorthPest.com. True North Pest Control.
Thanks so much. Tell them JB sent you.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've shared a story, not nearly the way you were, but the church we planted in Little Five in downtown Atlanta was housed in a theater that was run by the LGBTQ plus community. And when I reached out to them to say, um, we want to do a church here, they were kind of like, we need to talk. And so
Yeah,
I
they were.
came in and spoke with them. And I can remember they took us. What was funny is we met. They had a coffee shop adjacent to the theater, and in the coffee shop, there were bubble letters on the windows. And I love it because the queer community is so creative. And but in the window, it had in bubble letters the word adultery, and hanging off the bar was a tampon that had some red stuff on it, like tampons for Jesus and things of this nature. And, I was with another guy that, again, I was planting. I wasn't supposed to be the pastor. I was like the business side of things. I'd come out of the business world. And so, yeah, I just remember saying, this is where I feel the spirit of Jesus here. So like evident. I just feel like we're supposed to be here. Like this just feels right. And, because I didn't know if adultery was just the name of a coffee or if they were really promoting it, but because very interesting stuff. But at any rate, the guy that came down that ran the theater walked us through and showed us all the things and talked about how he didn't want to offend us. They were going to have shows, and they did. I mean, they would have shows on their marquee on Friday and Saturday night that would be wieners and boobs. And then on Sunday morning, we would have signs outside like "Come into Refuge City," And so we would do these kind of things, and I love that. I love that tension. But at the end of his tour, he said, "Here, I've got one last problem." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, I just hate churches." And I thought, yeah, like I totally
Fair.
get it. I was like, fair. Yeah. I said, I
feel that.
totally get it. Yeah.
I
I
still feel
said,
that.
that's right. I said, I totally get it. And I said, if you'll give me a chance, I'm going to do everything I am that I can to never pull out a soapbox. Like I'm going to do everything I can to really make you proud. And by the end of it, they had us in one of their small theaters. This theater is not the largest, but it had several stages and rooms. So they had us in a room that fit like 60 people. And as we grew, I was trying to say, like, what can we do? And they finally said, we're going to give you the main stage. And then he eventually came to me and said, we're going to give you the main stage at the price of the small stage because you guys are cleaning up our theater and painting walls and redoing this and doing all these things. And he's like, y'all are loving on us so well. And I looked at him, I said, I'm going to tell everybody that you're now a tithing member. And he said, if you do that, I'm kicking you out. So and I had tons of other stuff in that.
That's
So when you work in
hilarious.
the community, but and I'm still friends with that group today, and I love them dearly. And we used to make sure we paid for all their MARTA passes to go to the Pride Parade and all these things, and stand with them and support them. And but it was a community that I saw a lot of hurt in, and
Yeah.
you're right, and it's very tough to create space. For people that are hurt like that in the church. And you talked about it earlier. What made that so hard for you, that tension to bring people back in? Was it you said they were just done with it, or these,
Well, yeah. I think I think a lot of people are just sick of, like you just said, church. There's a lot of tactics, a lot of marketing gimmicks, a lot of phrases and stuff used, and I think that there are some people that have just been so hurt and so traumatized that it's just not healthy for them to ever walk back into a traditional church space, And so it's like, how do you figure out, for those people that are wanting to, I'm not talking about like
Mm,
door to door or kind of
yeah.
any kind of like programming evangelicalism or whatever, but how do you give space for people to allow them to meet God wherever they are, right?
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Um, and so, just trying to get creative. And, a lot of the places that I do stuff here locally, like I do a lot of justice work. One of the things that I get to be a part of is I'm part of what's called the programming committee that helps lead like all of our No Kings and all of that kind of stuff. There's a lot of people in there, man, that do not trust pastors, that do not trust the
Yeah,
church.
I get it. Yeah.
And so I never lead with I'm a pastor. It's just not what I'm going to do. I think a lot of people have figured it out because Gainesville is a big small town, if you know what I mean. And so it doesn't take long. So I think most people already know what I do, but they also know what I also do, right? Or they know how the two are combined. And so I think one of the ways that I've personally been able to bridge that for people that would never walk into the doors of a church is I believe this wholeheartedly, that shared values is greater than shared beliefs. So we can come together around these shared values that I find like central to the life of Jesus, central to the way of Jesus. You don't have to see them that way, but who cares? We're still doing this thing where like we are literally serving the least of these. What do I care what you call them? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's been one of the ways that we've been able to really bridge stuff is through that.
Sometimes it's just getting in there and saying, I'm just going to work alongside you. Right.
Yep.
I mean, I'm just going to, you know, I'm just going to love on you. I'm going to go to lunch with you. You're passionate about something.
And for no reason other than I'm just going to love you. We're just going to lunch.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the hardest thing I think for Christians because there's this whole thing about that, you know, the Great Commission, right? And so like I get it. I get the heart, and I talk to a lot of people. You know, even just having a podcast, and I live in a world, and the community I live in, I mean, is a very conservative community. We call it L.A. where I live, and that stands for Lower Alabama. So, you know, we you know, it's definitely so I know that, and it's Florida, and Florida's got that, but you know, Floribama, that's right. And so, but that's one of the things because I talk to a lot of people that I understand that God and I'm not trying to take, I don't want to say they feel that that's factual for them, that God changed their life and made their life better. And because he made it so good, they want to tell others. So I understand that. It's just how you do it. It's how you do it. I mean, that quote that's attributed to Francis of Assisi, right? I mean, preach the gospel often and use words when necessary. I mean, that's where that's it. I mean, that's kind of it. Joe, the I hear this a lot too. And I get pushback from this online, sometimes even in person. I get people that will question me. And you know, I usually answer it as like Proverbs, like a gentle answer turns away wrath. But you know, it's that being progressive or being woke as a Christian or all that, like it's the easy way out. Like it's a cheap way to be, you know. Why? What do you think about that statement? Where does it land for you? Because I know it costs.
Yes. If people really want to know the truth, I got a couple of things to say about this. If I wanted to make all the money in the world, if I wanted a huge platform, which I don't care about, it was all accidental, by the way, just so that everybody knows, like my social media presence was literally just a random accident. It's here. I'm going to use it. When it goes away, my life will not change. But here's the God's honest truth, man. If I wanted to make money, and I don't make much money, I work 2 jobs and I just grabbed a third side hustle online. That's outside of social media stuff.
Right.
That's remote work. So I hustle a lot. I've got a car that's sitting out in the driveway right now that's broken down, that won't run, and I'm going to take it to a repair shop. I'm borrowing my neighbor's car at the moment so that we can get around. So that's what it means to be a progressive, open and affirming pastor. If I wanted to make money, if I wanted the easy way, all I would have to say is I was wrong. And the right wing, MAGA, whatever you want to call it, would welcome me with open arms. You want to talk about book deals or speaking deals?
Right.
Here's this guy that's got a platform that's, you know, roughly 100,000 people online, and he says he's wrong. All I would have to do is say that I was wrong. I was wrong. And then, boom, here come all the deals. That's exactly what would happen. I will say this too, as far as the easy way.
Well, that's the grift, by the way.
Well, that is totally the grip, dude. Like I wish people would actually realize how much money flows through those right-wing creators. They have no clue what they're saying. There was a clip of Riley Gans the other day that went kind of viral because she didn't even know what she was supposed to talk about. She's
Like,
looking
what?
off screen. What are the things I'm supposed to say? The pillars that I'm supposed to believe in? Oh yeah. Like that's it. That's the grift. She's getting those checks. That's the only thing.
That's
Like just
exactly
go
right.
back to fifth place and shut up. Uh, well,
Yeah, I
well,
mean, look, I get it. I get it. The grift is real, man. The grift is
it
real.
is totally real. There is literally tens of millions of dollars pumping through these right wing creators that are being paid by like CPAC and
Yeah.
Turning Point, and I mean it's unreal. But back to your point, I, I have found that one of the biggest detriments of the Christian faith is that we over spiritualize the teachings of Jesus. We kind of Superman him.
Uh-huh.
And so when
Yeah.
he teaches certain things, we make it about the afterlife and then just like don't apply it to anything here in this life. Unless it's like that personal relationship or worship or prayer or reading your Bible. However, in Matthew, when Jesus is talking about the wide and narrow paths, right? I was taught, I'm sure you were too, that those things meant like the narrow path is the way to heaven and the wide path is the road to hell, the highway to hell, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Jesus is not using afterlife language there.
Right.
And one of the things that's like really detrimental is how we've sectioned off these things. And so people read them as individual teachings rather than like a teaching. And right before that, Jesus is talking about the golden rule, right? That's what we've termed it. Like treat others the way you want to be treated. All the law and the prophets hang on that. And then he immediately goes into the narrow road and the wide road. How we treat people now either leads to life now or it leads to destruction now. So let's look at the fruit, right? Let's look at the fruit of what it means to be progressive. Let's look at the fruit of what it means to be, I don't want to say conservative because I don't think all conservative people can fit into that, but like MAGA, right wing.
Yeah.
Let's look at the fruits of those things. How we treat people. If your theology, if your teachings make people not want to be here anymore, that's the wide path, bro. Like, I don't care what verses you're throwing at me.
Right.
What's the impact? I don't care what your intent is. What's the impact? If it makes my queer sibling want to not be here, it's not of God, period. That's just it. The other one that does it for me is Luke chapter 4, where Jesus is teaching at the synagogue, his hometown synagogue. Everybody loves it. They're celebrating their hometown boy, this inbreaking of God's spirit. It's happening right here. And then all of a sudden, Jesus tells two stories where God shows up outside the boundaries that they have decided means out and in. And they freak out and they try to murder him. And as I was going through my own stuff, and I remind myself of this constantly, I can either join Jesus on the edge of the cliff or I can join the mob pushing him to the edge of the cliff. Where am I? Where am I at? And that's based on the stories that Jesus told of God showing up outside their boundaries. And he's warning them, you guys are going to miss what God is doing because you're drawing all these lines that God's not. Be careful. And they didn't like it. So for me, the idea of like the easy way or however you want to phrase that, the easy way is to stand on a stage like these jack wagons at Echo Church and scream and yell about how queer people are going to hell, about how woke is blah, 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 and just yell and rake in the money. Or I'm going to take the narrow road. I'm going to stand on the edge of the cliff, right? Like for me, that's what it means to follow Jesus. I think the other stuff is literally just a grift. They might believe it. But man, it makes it really easy to believe when you're getting checks with all those zeros at the end of it.
What's frustrating for me is that I don't, they might believe it. That's a fair point. I don't know I kind of with you. I don't want to question anyone's beliefs in their heart, but it is tough. What's really frustrating for me is that you're dealing in things in the spiritual, soul of people, which is just this inner guidance, of people's morality and who they are and it's just the very essence. And you're leading them in a way that, quite frankly, you very well might not even believe, but you're leading in a way to be so unhealthy. So you have people sitting in the pews that certainly believe it, right? And they become
Oh,
because you
very
talk to them,
true.
they love it, and honestly, I know so many people that have a great heart and, good integrity outside of, like, what they spew about church and different things like that. Like, you're going like, "Man, this is a really, really nice person that wants to do well," and I can see them feeding the homeless and packing up, trailer loads to go to hurricane release and all of these things, but then you see these mega churches. I have a friend that, does stuff in a mega church, and, they wanted to start a ministry, and it was a pretty big ministry and a beautiful ministry. And the church didn't know where to place her because they had to say, "We're gonna place you in a, small group. We're just gonna call your ministry like a small group." Because, outside of, the security team and the coffee shop and the greeters, they didn't have any outside there's no outside sort of ministry going on, other than give, 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 and then when you wanna do the other things, give, 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 and it's kinda like, what you know, it's like it's turned into a big business. I don't know if you know the boys over at the religious business, but that documentary I had them on last season, and Nathan Atfill and Chris Ayub, and that documentary series, I'd encourage anyone to go and check it out because it has become a business and it is a massive grift, and it's really concerning. For me, the deconstruction was a really weird process, and I didn't even know it was happening. And there were moments that there was always moments, I feel like even at a young age, I just remember having this heart in me because I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was my mother. I don't know if it was that I had some good leaders that really cared about the youth or whatnot, and still had some language that could be problematic. And I wouldn't say that necessarily about my mother. She I felt like gave me a really clear picture of a loving Jesus and a loving God. But I always had this heart in me when I saw bullying. I always had this thing in me when I saw people that were marginalized and there's just something in me. And so I wrestled with that for a long time silently in the church, and I don't know if that's what helped me to start asking the questions out loud as I finally came of, I mean, my frontal lobe was fully closed by the time I started deconstructing, and I don't know if that's what it took, but what was that? Is that how you felt when you were like, what made you start asking these questions? Did you just feel that the whole time?
Man, yeah, I attribute a lot of my deconstruction to my dad.
Mm,
Uh, he handed me a healthy distrust of authority,
mm,
and so I always felt the need to question. Now, I didn't always do that. Like in my 20s, I did not do that at all.
mhm,
It
right,
wasn't until my late 20s, early 30s that I started like, wait, just because you're up there doesn't mean anything, right?
mhm,
Um, but that's kind of what did it. The first thing that really started it was the birth of my daughter in
mm,
2002.
'kay,
Uh, that was like the big moment where I looked at her and I was like, wait, this system that we're in is going to teach her that she can't be whatever she wants to be because she's got the wrong plumbing. You're
mm,
you're telling me
wow,
that
wow,
God is not going to speak to and through her the same way that God does me just because
yeah, yeah,
that don't make any sense. And I know that again, we all have our history, and I know it's like, well, why did it take that? It just
yeah,
did. I don't know. I
yeah,
can't explain it. My wife, I never saw my wife as less than, and we didn't even operate from like a complementarian, like I was the head of the household. We've always been a partnership. That's the
yeah,
way
yeah,
functionally, that's just the way it's always been. So I never I never made that connection with the marriage relationship, but it was my daughter, and that theology fell apart so fast, dude. It wasn't even difficult. And so that was like, wait a second, if that fell apart so easily, then what else is going to fall apart so easily? And so I just started pulling threads, and it took a long time. I mean, that was like 2002, and I probably didn't ask a really another big question for several years. Uh, but it was working at a church that was, it wasn't a mega church, but it was incredibly large. It was just under what would be labeled mega church, but it very much operated in the mega church culture because that was the goal. That was the stated goal of the church I was at, was like, we're going to be a mega church. We're going to make that list of 100 fastest growing churches in America. That was a goal.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Yeah.
so that really forced me to be like, dude, this can't be it. Like, I'm dying over here. My marriage is falling apart. I don't get to see my kids very much. Like, this can't be it.
Yeah.
So it was the kind of the same thing. And then, I hate bullies too, dude. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I started recognizing that in the church, in Christianity, in American Christianity. And it was just like, yeah, man, this ain't it. Like, you telling me that Jesus showed up,
Yeah.
taught for
Yeah.
3 years about love and sacrifice and service, love of others, love of God, and then just got beaten to shreds and died for this? Like,
Yeah.
that can't be it, man. That just can't be it.
You know, what's crazy is when the church that I planted out from, I feel like they gave a lot of space for my questions, but I could feel though, and I think that's part of the reason I don't want to place any blame on them, because a lot of those guys and colleagues and pastors there are still friends of mine, and they do give a lot of space for grace and people to figure it out. And so I don't think they get it all right, and there's not a lot of churches that do. But they get some things wrong, and there were things that I would push back on that I definitely think caused tension inside the church that I just have to give them grace for some of that. I mean, they could. I also have to give them props because there were people from all walks of life that were able to come into that church and feel safe enough to come in the doors, which isn't always the same. I mean, that safety in church. I can remember when I realized our church just needed to move forward, and I had other things that I needed to focus on. And so I ended up walking out of our church in Little Five. Again, I never really felt I was supposed to even be there. Um, and so I can remember a lady that she was a lesbian in our church, and her wife had died. I performed their funeral, and it was a very healing story. But, she went to move back to her hometown in Tennessee, and she called me and said, "I still wanna go to church." And I said, "Well, let me help you. I'm gonna help you find a place that we can go." And so I picked up a phone and I started calling, and I started emailing, and all these churches in and around, Nashville. And, I got nothing. I mean, I got nothing. I mean, that there were moments that it was like, "Well, she's welcome here, but we don't, you know, she can't be a member." Or some of you get, well, yeah, I mean, we don't, they just kind of hem haw, but I mean, and then most of them would, I don't know who to talk to. Let me get you to somebody, and nobody ever called me. I remember having to call her and tell her, like, I don't know how to tell you this, but there's not a safe place to go where you're headed that I've found. And you're going to have to be super intentional about it. By God's grace, she still loves Jesus today.
Is she still in Nashville?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think she has
Centerpoint.
found a place. think she has found her place now.
Okay,
So
good. Because I was gonna suggest Centerpoint up in Nashville.
perfect.
Josh, I just lost his last name.
Well, I'm writing
Doesn't
it down because I'm going to send her a message too to make sure if she doesn't. But I know she told me last time we communicated. She told me she had found a place, but she probably made herself a little smaller. in
Yeah.
that place. If I'm honest.
Yep. Centerpoint. I will shout out Centerpoint. Pastor Josh. I cannot remember his last name, and I don't want to get it wrong.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah,
a place where if you're queer or you do not have to shrink.
Yeah. Well, now there's
So
stuff
anyway,
online I've seen like Church Clarity and things like that that you can go
yeah, yep,
and check out and see, what's a safe place, which I didn't really know about these things
yep.
until,
Gaychurch.org is another good one.
okay. See, I didn't even know because finding safety is so important because what does it feel like for somebody to come into the church and feel, I mean, this should be a hospital for the sick,
Yeah,
you
I don't
know?
know. Yeah,
And to come in and then all of a sudden, like, I can't imagine what it feels like to come in and then have the veil ripped and saying like, "No, that's not okay." That's gotta be almost the worst feeling ever. I mean, it's gotta
yeah, I
cause
don't know,
more
man.
trauma than yeah, I don't know either. In fact, if Jesus walked into American church today, what do you think would surprise him?
Oh man, that's a good question. I want to be careful here because I don't want it to sound like you said a second ago. You said, most churches don't get it all right. I don't think any church gets it all right, and so I don't want to come from a position of like I've got it all right.
Sure,
There's
sure.
plenty that I suck at,
Yeah,
or just
same.
I still whatever. Man, that's a good question though, dude. I don't know if we're talking about the Big C church.
Mhm.
I think probably if Jesus were to walk into just a typical church today, I think the thing that would probably surprise him the most is um is how wrapped in imperialism the church has become. Right? Like I
Yeah.
can't imagine the early church looking at America and being like, wait, you've got you've got the symbol of your empire right next to the symbol of the crucified Christ. What?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
I
yeah,
just I have a hard time
yeah,
picturing that they would even
yeah,
that would be that they would even conceive that would be a thing, right?
yeah, yeah,
I mean, you look at like Revelation, which is just this thinly veiled critique, just massive critique of Rome of empire,
yeah,
and and the American church is just like you know prostituted itself, for lack of a better term,
yeah,
hoard itself out
yeah,
to just for political power. I think
right,
that's
that's crazy.
probably
That's yeah,
that would I think that would probably be the biggest like wait what
mm,
is going on, you're doing what.
yeah. Yeah, no, Joe, it's interesting you said that because I mean, and it never works out well for the church when we've
No,
cozied up to the government. I mean, just go back in history; it's never worked out well. At some point, the pendulum
for
swings the
anybody.
other way, so it doesn't.
Yeah,
Yeah, it doesn't work out well at all. I mean, Shane Claiborne's been railing on. I don't know if it's the Irresistible Revolution or if it was another book. That was a book that
I've
really
got it
started.
right here.
Yeah,
Irresistible Revolution, Follow Me to Freedom. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
There were
Jesus for
several books.
President.
Yeah, Jesus for President. There were books back in like 2012, 2011, 2014. I mean, he was writing against the flag being bigger than the cross a long time ago and calling out that
Long time ago.
this is,
He
headed in
was
the
he
wrong
was one of my
direction.
early influences in deconstruction, and I
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to be able
Same.
to tell him that.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to be
Same.
like, I interviewed him and I was like, "Hey, man, look, this book
Yeah.
is from 2012 or whenever it was." Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're right, dude. You're right.
He and I've exchanged some emails, and I've told him through email how I felt, because I do feel he was a big, big framer in saying,
Oh
like,
man, for
there's a
so
different
many.
way to think for so many. I mean,
Yeah,
he was
for
just
so
it
many.
was in a loving way in how he said it, and it was a way that I felt gave voice to those inner feelings I had, and I didn't know that I was allowed to say them out loud, and that was something that, set with me because but yeah, it's interesting you frame that the church and seeing it that way. I think I do think there's some things that what gets me too about just and I guess you're right. I'm framing it as a large, just we're throwing in everybody. But I think Beth Moore had a saying that I heard one time where she was saying how Paul talks about some among us, right? Like
Mm,
not all, not
yeah, that's
everyone,
actually
but
yeah.
some among us, some
Not
among us.
every
Yeah,
Christian, but
but
always a
some, yeah,
Christian.
but some among us, right? And so some among us, um, yeah, get it. Life's so hard. Life is so hard, and we have built these rules around this is what the Christian life looks at, and looks like, and I just wanna shake people and like, "Brother, there is no Christian life." Like, there is no way to look like it. You're going through life and you're dealing with it, and some days you're clinging on, and some days you're singing like, with the birds, you know? And then the people around you are doing the same thing. And so when I see scripture that says, rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. I think along that line, if Jesus showed up, if Paul showed up, if the other church showed up, um, I would think that they would also be surprised at how, like you just said, you talk about the Christian life, which is what made me think of it, is how it's been so twisted to make everything into a spiritual battle. It's all
Yeah.
war.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all war.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I'm pretty sure that the pinnacle week of Jesus's life was one gigantic critique of,
Yeah.
of imperialism and war. The dude rode in on a donkey rather than a war horse, like
Yeah.
like Augustus would, right? Like Pilate did. Uh, he he put down the weapon and picked up the basin and the towel, right? Told Peter, "Those who live by the sword died by the sword," and yet for some reason everything is about this spiritual battle, about storming the gates of hell. And I'm just like, I remember when that sounded and felt good. Like, I'm not going to, I
Mhm.
remember that. But
Yeah.
I'm just so much more interested in, like, I don't know, sharing a meal.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
You know what
Yes.
I mean? Like,
Yes.
if I could sit down with somebody and just like, we're going to eat and talk, isn't that better than me just charging at them with the armor of God? You know what I mean? Like, I get why
Yeah. Yeah.
Paul used that.
Yeah.
I understand why I use that imagery, right? Like, it
Yeah.
was the thing around them.
Yeah.
But I just think we take some of that stuff too literally, and it's like, or we elevate the words of Paul beyond the words of Jesus, which I think is a huge mistake.
Well, I agree. I mean, why are we not looking at Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? And
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
so I mean, I get a lot of pushback online in my stuff that from I don't know what they call themselves, but they're definitely a part of the 45,000 different denominations or thoughts of Christianity, but they are like they completely push off the 13 books of Paul. That is done. That set up a wrong church and focus on Jesus. So I get what they're saying. I just don't know that I'm not gonna just get rid
Yeah,
of
I think
everything Paul said, either.
right. I think
There's
that
beauty to some of it, but yeah.
yes, and I think the big mistake when it comes to stuff like Paul is more about biblical inerrancy than it is Paul.
Yeah, yeah.
Once you're able to understand what the Bible is and allow it to be what it is, then you can actually say, you know what, uh, Paul was wrong about this,
Yeah, they
and
were
I'm going to set that aside,
yeah.
right? Because it's not helpful anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
It was
Yep.
probably super helpful for when he wrote it.
Sure.
It even in some of the language that he uses around slavery, and of course, slavery is wrong. End of story. Owning a person for any reason in any sense is wrong. End of story. And yet, the language that he uses in like the original language is kind of like, holy crap! You put that down on paper and told him to treat his slave like a brother.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, of
Yeah,
course, it's still
yeah,
problematic
yeah.
now, but
Sure,
like, if
sure.
you can just allow it to be what it is, where it is,
Right,
um,
contextual, who is written to, time is written in, all those different
yeah, and
things.
I don't think we pull it forward. So
No, no,
please don't
I
hear
agree.
that. I don't think we
No,
pull it forward.
no, no.
We don't pull forward Paul's sexual ethics. So please set that
Right,
down, right? Like,
right,
unless you just decided to be celibate and not get married, then you've already done that. You've already set aside things that aren't helpful.
right,
Um,
right. No, it's very interesting you say that. I mean, because I totally agree with that thought of it. Because I've always thought that just as just thinking about myself as a human being, and when you look back in the world, I think it was what 1976, 1978 that the Bible inerrancy really came about in the Western
yeah,
culture, right?
yeah,
And so prior to that, people were able to really. debate and have talks and realize that there was infallibility in Paul, and that they were setting up a church and at the time, and they took the best of what they knew and they got through it. But there's some inerrancy that every single word was God, had their hand and was writing in their hand. And, you've got that sort of thinking, and that's
damaging, so damaging, so harmful.
So damaging. The other point I wanted to bring up is you talked about now the Jesus that came in on a donkey, the Jesus that said you live by the sword, you die by the sword. I mean, there's two Jesuses, right? Because then you've got the Jesus in Revelation that comes in on a white horse with the sword, and again, there's imagery about the what was going on at the times, but that's what we're holding on to. Is people say that's the character of God. And it's like, no, God put Jesus, like John 1, the word became flesh and lived among us. That's
Was it? Is it Philippians 2? Is that the hymnal where Jesus did not consider equality with God something to be grasped?
Right.
Is that Philippians 2?
I think you might be right. I'd have to go and look.
That he humbled himself.
Yeah.
That's Jesus.
Yeah.
This, there are almost nothing I would agree with Martin Luther on. Almost nothing. Except for the fact that he also too believed that Revelation did not belong in the canon.
Right.
I think that I understand why they wrote what they wrote. I get it. If you're an oppressed people and you're trying to write in this apocalyptic imagery to give them courage and encouragement, that makes total sense. But when you are the empire and you co-opt those images that the oppressed used, and then you take them and own them
to oppress.
Yes, to then turn around and oppress. Absolutely. It's done so much damage. It's just not helpful. No, Jesus is not going to come back. Jesus not some UFC fighter with a tattoo on his thigh. And I can remember talking about that in my 20s, man. It's so embarrassing.
Yeah.
Just so like, okay, Dana White, shut up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just what I feel like. I mean, these Mark Driscoll types, like, dude, just go in your man cave and be alone. Shut up. You go think about what you just said.
Right. It's so funny. I have a tattoo, Sola Gratia, and I got it years ago. And the 5 pillars that Martin Luther nailed, the thesis. So I tend to agree. As I studied more, I was like, oh wow, that's interesting. I still like grace alone, so I'm leaving it. But but because that part resonated with me. I can take away the grace alone, Christ alone. I can take away those sorts of things. I can take away.
Right?
Yeah.
Take what's helpful. Yeah. I totally. Yeah, I'm down with that.
No doubt. So you've got some people in your audience, and maybe we'll let this be kind of the last sort of question to wrap this up. And by the way, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, man. I really,
man, it's been really good. I really enjoyed it.
I hope there's people that are listening today, and if you're in the car or you're watching online or wherever you watch these pods, I just want to tell you, I hope this somehow hits with you and starts asking questions. And if you've been yelling at us because we're wrong, by all means, lean into that anger, and just kind of ask yourself, why and what inside you causes you to get angry, and think about, like, what does that mean? Just dive into it more and start asking more questions. I'm just telling you, if you allow your head to hit your heart at the same time, you may find yourself really close to Jesus all of a sudden. You may just find yourself really close to Jesus. So I'm gonna leave that there, but you got a lot of people in your audience. How do you help people, or in your audience, how do you help someone anywhere, whether it's in real life, IRL, as the kids say, distinguish between rejecting Jesus and rejecting harmful expressions of Christianity? Because that's right. Like, throwing the baby out with the bathwater is not where I'm at. I'm holding on to him, not letting them take Jesus from me.
Yeah. Let me say this. This is going to have to be a nuanced answer.
Yeah.
So my deconstruction took several years. It was awful. Some of the darkest moments of my entire life happened in that season. I honestly, and I mean this with every fiber of my being, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. It was terrible. And I had to go through a season where it was like, I'm going to burn it all down. I'm going to burn it all. I'm going to throw the baby out with the bathwater because I didn't know what else to do. So I think for some people, that like that season of rage is what they have to do. I had to go through that. I had to, and I didn't realize that at the time, right? Like that's not something I was like consciously making a decision of. However, what I found was that Brian McLaren's got a really good book on this. Faith After Doubt, I think is what it's called. And he talks about simplicity, perplexity, no, simplicity, complexity, perplexity. And then I can't remember what the fourth stage is, but he labeled that stage as perplexity, where, or Richard Rohr calls it disorder, where everything is falling apart. It's very nihilistic. Everything is like, I just want to burn everything down. The problem is that is a really easy spot to just make your camp and just, I'm going to stay here. And I found that to be just as unhealthy, maybe more unhealthy than my fundamentalism was. So I want to say that I think some people have to go through that. My encouragement is don't stay there, regardless of where you land on the other side of that stage. Do not stay there. Like, at some point in time, it was just like I was following these creators and it felt good, right? To like yell and scream and rage and punch and swing. That felt really, really good because I was in that moment. I realized now that I was like taking back things that had been taken from me. And I had to go through that where I was like taking those things back. But at some point in time, it's got to be more than just yelling. Okay, now what? Are you just going to sit there and scream? Like there's a quote, I think it's a song. I would rather, what is it? Like, it's something about like lighting a match instead of just screaming at the darkness. I can't remember how it goes. It's an old song, but I
feel like you
felt
need to
that like,
chat it. If I chat
yeah,
GPT, did it tell me, right?
yeah. At some point in time, it was like, okay, but there's got to be something more than this. Like, I can't just sit here and scream.
Yeah.
So I do think that some people have to go through that. However, on the other side of that, I think that there is a world of space for people to come to different conclusions. Like you said, like there's 45,000 different worldwide denominations, all of them saying that they're led by the same spirit, right? Being led to just so either it's all made up or there's a point to that, right? And I feel like so many people want to rage, and I think the algorithms feed that. I think that's a big problem of social media. It feeds that kind of rage, that bitterness, that certainty, regardless of where it's coming from. But I would encourage people to step beyond that, because there's a lot of beauty on the other side of that. And if I'm being very honest, very frank, there are days I'm not sure what to do with Jesus. I wrestle with, is God there? Is God? I wrestle with that still. I wrestle with, is Jesus divine or did they make him divine? I wrestle with that.
You're not the first.
Yeah, I constantly, man, constantly, I wrestle with those things.
Same.
However, on the other side of all of that, my wrestling is now, it doesn't produce anxiety in me. Like it's not a, I don't fear it. I'm not afraid of it. My eternal destination does not depend on me having all the right answers on the Scantron, right? And so I have found uncertainty and the mystery to be incredibly beautiful on the other side of it. And I'll just end with this. And I say this with all the love in my heart, like in the nicest possible way is what I mean. I find it to be the height of human arrogance to look out into the cosmos that we exist in, this infinite, expanding universe, and to see the things that we can now see as the human race that has never been seen before. To look at all of that, to see the how gigantic, enormous it is, that we have pictures of things like the pillars of creation, which is, I can't even remember how many millions of light years it is across. That alone right there, I cannot comprehend, like, with my brain, how big that is. I think it's the height of human arrogance to look at that and be like, yep, I figured out the thing that created that. I
Mm,
figured out God. That I can't understand the creation, but I understand the creator. I just think that's ridiculous. And
yeah.
and so and somehow we have decided that the most important thing about God is my opinion of God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I and I
Yeah. Yeah.
you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
is that really the most important thing about God? Like, and I've just been able to let that go on the other side of that. And like you said, I'm just not going to let, and I know we haven't been talking politics and I don't mean to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
political,
No,
but
it's okay.
I'm just not going to let MAGA redefine Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm
No,
just not going to let him do it.
same, same,
Wh-
same.
which is really which is really one of the motivating factors of, like, why I still do stuff on social media. Is like, nope, guys who look like me are redefining what this is. They're saying the worst things. They're not going to be the only voice. That
Yeah.
not if I've got some say in it, they're not going to be the only voice, because that is not Jesus. And
I
just
agree.
be, yeah, yeah,
You know, Paul said, right? We're talking about Paul, and one of the things I can lean into Paul is the fact that he said, I see dimly.
mm,
Now I see dimly.
yep,
Yeah. So, Joe, I want to give you a chance to tell the audience, though, where they can find that fine shirt. Is it the Slippery Slope? Is that what's the
yeah.
name?
It's the Slippery Slope is the name of the t-shirt company. It's a Shopify store. So if you just typed in, like, Slippery Slope Shopify, it pops right up. It's the only one called that. Um, it's actually really popular. This is like her bestseller.
For sure.
Um,
The full
yeah,
shirt
people are.
says "Love the belief or hate the belief,"
Yeah, I
which
can't
is a
really.
play. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I it's
yeah.
good. Love the belief or hate the belief, which is, of course, the play on love the sinner, hate the sin.
Hate the sin. Yeah,
But
it's really
yeah,
popular right
I
now.
just wanted to give your wife a shout out there because I know
Yeah,
that
man,
store is
appreciate that.
great and they can check you out at therealjoe.smith. So
That's it.
thanks again, and I really appreciate your time on here, and hey, to the audience, until next time, right?